Hi, I'm Mateusz from Board Game Colors, and today we're gonna paint a mighty Japanese demon. You might remember one of my previous videos about a Mermen mini, my entry for a local painting competition. This ONI Demon is my second entry, and one I'm most proud of. In this video I'm going to focus on building a display base, painting red glowy skin, and a freehand Sacura flowers on her clothes. I'm also going to talk a little about some color choices and some other minor details. Okay, let's jump to the building part. For me, this mini had to be Japanese demon, Oni, so red skin, katana, maybe some anime vibe. But what is the story behind it? She has a really intimidating pose, very confident in her skill and power. Maybe she's protecting something, maybe she's guarding an old temple or some forgotten evil god. I decided to go with this idea. I started by drawing a gate template. Then I cut horizontal beams from balsa wood, pillars from sushi sticks, and a base of an arch from IKEA pencils. I glued them together and used a saw to damage it a little so it looks older. I know that this kind of gates are sometimes located at the end of stairs on top of the hill, so I wanted to build my base around this idea. I glued 3 pieces of cork sheet together and formed a ground with milliput. Before it dried, I painted some areas with wood glue and sprinkled with some coarsely ground pepper and finely ground coffee. Yes, you heard me correctly. I sometimes use spices and coffee as basic materials. Wait until you see how it looks after painting. Finally, I drilled some holes in Oni legs and glued pegs made from pins, so I can easily attach her to the base whenever I want. When it dried, I base coated it the usual way, and here you can see the result. Usually I would show you a step-by-step here, but I'm not sure if this format is interesting. So today I will briefly discuss how I painted the base, but I will focus on 2 different topics later on. If you think that some topic needs a better explanation, let me know. I might make a dedicated video about it later on. So about the base. I decided to use the wet blending technique to paint a ground. First I painted it with basic colors, then I started adding some heavily diluted paints, inks and washes, and blended them together before they dry. There are some greens and blues on the stairs, and some browns and reds on the ground. While waiting for a base to dry, I painted the gate red, remembering to leave the black in the shadow. I also avoided using an intense red color so it won't steal an attention of the viewer. I also added a tiny sign meaning death on a plate, to suggest whose that shrine is. I came back to the base, but this time used a dry brushing technique to pick up some details with warm colors, like beige, caramel, and their mixes with the light grey. Finally, I used a heavily diluted wash on about 70% of the base and stamped some green paint with a dry brush here and there. Generally, this way of painting has a simple goal: to avoid flat, boring planes of a same color and to add a lot of gradients and textures. And it took less than an hour. Okay, let's proceed with the mini. First I wanted to paint the skin. In my mind I had an image of red sweaty skin, so hot from inside that it's steaming. Something like this guy from an Attack of Titan anime. I also wanted it to be of a very high contrast, with dark shadows and very bright highlights. First I prepared some colors on my wet palette. red, orange, black, magenta and violet. I also mixed some dark brown. I painted it with pure red and mixed some dark brown in the shadows. I knew where they should be simply by following my base coat I prepared with spray cans. This stage is all about making a sketch, so I didn't spend much time on it. I felt I need more contrast, so I added some magenta and then violet in shadows, this time with some more precision. Now I think I reached my darkest shadow color, so I started bringing back more lead parts to the red. First I started with pure red. And then I followed by adding some orange to the mix, and even pure orange on some areas facing upwards. Okay, now let's talk business. I've gone even further and started painting up-facing parts with yellow. But this time I wanted to leave only thin brush strokes, so it looks like muscle fibers. Then I even added some white brush strokes in places where I felt sweaty skin will reflect sunlight. Now it's a time for a filter. I painted all this violet, yellow and white because I was planning to filter them with red ink. For starters, I simply painted all over the skin with ScaleColor Inktense red. Then I worked again with highlights, the same way as previously, and again with ink. Lastly, I felt this red is too warm, and I wanted it to be a little more cherry red. So I mixed some magenta paint with glaze medium and again used it as filter. So you might ask how it works. Generally, when I picked a red, I located it at a color wheel. Then I picked a color that is a mix of red and blue for the shadows and a yellow for the highlights. You can see that in theory violet is much closer to red than yellow. But I knew that when I use a red filter it will easily cover bright yellow and white, but it will struggle with dark violet, so in the end it will even out on a mini. Next I painted a navy blue cloth. I also made sure to add some texture and contrast in the waves of a fabric, so it will make a more interesting background for my Sacura pattern. As usual, I looked for a reference on the internet and proceeded with a painting. First, I painted all the twigs, remembering to follow the brightness of the fabric, so light brown on the brighter parts and darker brown in shadows. Then I painted some leaves with green, moving my brush strokes from the pointy end to the stick. Next I added some brighter green inside previously painted leaves. I was worried that it will be very stressful, but in reality it was such a relaxing process. Next I used cold white to paint petals. I tried to paint 5 dots in a circle, but after the first one I felt I need more randomness. So I've gone with the gut feeling, painting smaller and bigger flowers, alone and in groups. I followed by mixing some pink and white and painted some dots in the middle of the flowers. I was trying to be precise, but I didn't stress out about misplacing some of those. Some chaos is more natural. Finally, I added some small dots with pure pink in some of the bigger flowers. You could also notice that I still have blue paint on my wet palette. I treated it as insurance. If I messed up anything, I could always correct it right away. This mindset made the whole process way less stressful. Also, it appears that this kind of pattern is way easier to execute than geometrical ones. So if you want to train some freehands in the future, you might consider using a pattern like this. Then I continued with the rest of the mini. I made sure to add threads texture on a cord against her waist, and I also painted pearls in a similar way as in my Mermen diorama. But the biggest challenge in following step was painting blades. I wanted them to stand out a little, so the viewer might want to look at them for a moment. I also felt that this ONI girl needs very dark weapon with some magical, out-of-place shine. I looked for some inspiration in anime and decided to go with Roronoa Zoro katana from the One Piece series. The dark part wasn't that challenging. I simply painted over it with Abyssal blue, which is very matte color, mixed with some black. Added very delicate reflections with grey, and smoothed it out a little with a mix of those colors. The cutting edge was more challenging, but I made this gradient from magenta to white, making sure to paint the edge with a thin line of the brightest color. Then adding those semicircles was quite easy. Of course, I spent way more time on the other details as well. Armor, wood, jewelry, hair, they all had a lot of my attention, but telling you about them all in detail would make this video way too long. And here you can see the final result. I'm very proud of it, and I feel it is one of the best I painted so far. How do you like it? Let me know in the comments. I told you it was my second entry in local competition, so I think I should show you the other entries. I really enjoy seeing all those interpretations, even though we all painted a red skin. In the end, the two painters who ended up in the finals was me and Maciej from Primordial Painting Studio. Congratulations! Now, if you have a moment, please tell me if this kind of video focused on only a few techniques is more or less enjoyable. Or maybe I should make a video entirely focused on one single technique in the future from time to time. Tell me in the comments. And with that being said, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye!